Hey, Steve here, and welcome to this next video in the series of processing subscribers' images. This one that we're working on today is sent in to me by Dewey. Unfortunately, Dewey, I didn't get a last name on the form that you filled out when you sent me this. So yeah, luckily I did get your description of what you wanted help with on this particular image. So yeah, from my notes I can see that basically you're asking about a couple of factors, bringing up the detail in these rocks here without losing too much quality in the image. Also making the water a lot brighter and sort of more white and making that pop a bit more, and also overall sort of contrast and just making the contrast pop a little bit more than it is. So at the moment what we've got on screen is basically the raw file that I've just loaded straight into Photoshop. And yeah, before I get started, actually, I just want to mention that I'll be using the Luminosity masking panel in this video, and you should see a link or button below this video. If you haven't got the panel yet, you can go and grab that for just $97. Otherwise, the techniques that are the panel are sort of helping me shortcut and do things a lot quicker. Those same techniques you can learn the various luminosity selection and masking techniques. But what I'm showing you here will show you the kind of the what to do. Otherwise, the how-to stuff, you'll be able to basically translate what I'm showing you here into the manual, longer way around of doing things, with these techniques. So yeah, let's get started with this image. And yeah, the first thing that I noticed actually that Dewey didn't mention, which was the first thing that kind of stood out to me with this image, is that the horizon could do with a little bit of a straightening. So I'm just going to use the crop tool here. I'm going to grab the straightening tool and I'm just going to drag a line across the horizon and let Photoshop do its thing. So I'll let go there, hit return, and according to Photoshop that's a straight horizon. Unfortunately it doesn't quite look straight to me, so I'm just going to do it a bit more by eye. I think maybe I could have used the lens correction tool before I loaded it into Photoshop, and that would have gotten rid of some barrel distortion, which might be the issue here. Let me just restart this. If I go from that end to here, is that gonna... No, let's go again. No, it's getting worse. Okay, so I'm going to leave this in, call it a blooper, I guess. Okay, that looks pretty straight to me now. So yeah, that's close enough. I'm going to go with it. So yeah, the first thing that we probably want to do is just work on the exposure, so bringing up the shadows in these rocks here. Because this is a raw file sent to me, I could have kind of created a duplicate raw file and then increased the exposure in the in-camera raw and used it that way. So we've got two exposures, one with a brighter exposure, or two versions of the same raw file, one with an increased exposure and one with the standard exposure, what we have here. Or because I'm working in 16-bit in Photoshop, I can actually create a duplicate. I can turn that into a smart object and then run the camera raw filter, and that's basically giving us the exact same advantages as using camera raw in the first place. So with this duplicate we can increase the exposure and just see how much detail we have in these rocks here. So unfortunately that will create a bit of noise. So let's zoom in and see what we've got here. So I've increased that by 4 stops. So this would have been better as a multiple exposures bracketed in camera. That would have produced a higher quality shadow image in the shadows. But what we can do here is we can basically increase the noise reduction just to sort of see if we can remove some of the noise. I usually find there's quite a bit of color noise when you start increasing shadows quite a lot. And then also maybe we can increase some sharpening as well, just to kind of remove a bit of that softness that we've added from the luminosity or from the luminance noise reduction. Zoomed in at this level as well, I can see we've got some chromatic aberration as well. So where's the, okay. Okay, we can remove that here just with the purple defringe slider. Sorry, I lost where it was for a second. So that looks okay now. So let's click OK on here. And now we've got this really, really bright exposure that we can now blend in with the original exposure. So again, just going back to the panel, if you didn't want to do that the long way, then we've got some buttons up here, create exposures. So you can create -3, -2, -1, +1, +2, +3. Haven't got a +4, which is what we ended up needing here. But you know, if you want to create some exposures from the same raw file, then you can just hit one of those buttons to shortcut that whole process of what I just showed you. You know, and it saves a few seconds, maybe you know, 20 or 30 seconds, I guess. But if you're pushed for time, then it can, you know, every second counts. So anyway, let's get back to blending this in. So how do we need to blend this in? Right, well, first of all, we need to add a layer mask. And I'm going to invert that mask, Command or Control I, to turn it black. Because, yeah, what we want to use, what we want to do is use this main exposure as the base and then just blend in the detail from the shadows. So the way we need to do that is with the brush tool selected. We need to create a luminosity selection that isolates the shadows. So I'm going to start off with a 5 here, so you know, on the shadows end, and that, because I've got the previews turned on, that's now previewing this selection before we use it. And the fact that these rocks here in the foreground are bright white versus almost black background, that tells me that we've got a decent isolation that we can, yeah, basically restrict our brush strokes to those areas that are white in the preview. These greys in the water might be a bit of a problem, so we can just modify this a little bit more. I'll hit the levels button and I'll just adjust these points here just to increase the contrast in this preview, because the more isolated we make these rocks, the more accurate our brush strokes can be when we blend the shadows in. So I'll click OK to apply that change, and now I'll click Use Mask in the panel, which is going to load the preview as a selection now. And just clicking on the layer mask of the bright exposure, let's go with a 40% opacity. I'm not sure how much we're going to end up needing, but let's brush this in now, and we can see the detail start to come through in this layer. Now we're also seeing it in some parts that we don't necessarily want, like just right here in the foreground, because yeah, we had some greys in the water there, I guess that means. So let's see what we can do to fix that. I'm just going to deselect my selection for a moment, Command D. Now that, yeah, that looks pretty, well, it looks pretty weird. So we might need to do something about that. Actually, I think we've probably over brightened this whole thing. So yeah, I'm just going to start this process again. So I'll press Command and Delete, or Control Delete on a PC on the mask. I'm just deleting the layer mask there now, so it's returned it to a pure black. And yeah, probably, well, let's just recreate that selection now. So 5 on the shadows, and let's just adjust it with the levels adjustment again like we did before. Okay, and now click Use Mask. I'm going to use a lower opacity. I'm going to use about 20. And now I can start brushing in here. And I'm going to try and stay away from that whole bottom end. So I think we can allow this very like this central foreground to remain a bit dark. So just bringing up the detail in some of these other parts. Because these rocks are dark for two reasons. One, because it's dark and they're silhouetted, and two, because they're black in the first place. So it's not going to make sense to really brighten them up and turn them like a bright grey, I don't think. We just need to bring enough detail through that we can actually see them and that it makes sense. So I think that looks okay. Apart from just here, I've kind of over blended. I've made these little rocks that are sticking up here, I've made them too bright still, so just need to repair those. Let me click on the layer mask and then click on the show mask button in the panel, and I'm just going to manually, with a brush with no selection active, I'm just going to remove these bits from the layer mask. Actually, let's go back to showing the layer, and I'll do this with the actual image in view just so that we can see what I'm bringing back. Yeah, this bit over here is way too bright. Yeah, I probably didn't need to blend these ones over here on the right hand side. So yeah, that's something definitely to watch out for anytime you're blending exposures, is what happens when you make something that is dark. What happens when you make it brighter than the things that are around it that are supposed to be bright. That's what we saw here. So okay, I think that looks pretty good now. I'm happy with that. It's kind of a subtle brightening. We haven't gone too far, but we've gone far enough that we can see the detail in those rocks now. So with that done, I think it's now really just a matter of adding some contrast to sort of make the image pop a little bit. So as always, I'm going to go to my trusty levels adjustment. So in the panel, I'm going to choose levels 1, and the default setting that's shown us, or that's given us, has actually created a really nice effect in the sky there. That's a really nice dark, deep, contrasty colour in the sky. So I think we'll keep that there, but we just need to remove this effect now from these dark rocks. We don't want to make them any darker than they are. So let's invert the mask. So Command I or Control I. And just to begin with, we can just freehand this in the sky. So let's go with 100% opacity brush. I'm just going to brush this effect in the sky here. And it is going over the edge of this rock, but what I can do now is actually just create a luminosity selection to isolate that. Click Use Mask, and now I can switch to my black brush and just brush that effect out in here, just because the selection is basically allowing me to brush into the rock without brushing into the sky now, to remove this effect from that rock. So here's the overall effect of this layer. So it's darkening the sky without touching the rocks now. Let's see if there's anything else we can do. Maybe, well, we can push this a little bit further, but then we're just going to have to recover these highlights here. So I'll do that. I'll let those overexpose, and we can see that they're overexposed, this bright patch on the horizon, because if I hold on the keyboard Alt or Option and click on this control point, we can see that we're getting that indication with those yellows and reds. So I'll just create a luminosity selection that isolates those highlights. Click Use Mask. I've still got the black brush selected, and I can just brush in here now and recover those highlights. Like so. So now let's have a look at this layer. That's a really nice, deep, colourful sky. Let's have a look at this water now. So I think my best tip really for making water look white is, if you want it like a pure white, then the best thing you can do, rather than try to change the colour, because it is quite a sort of blue colour, and that's because of the colour cast in the image. But rather than trying to physically make it white, I say physically, don't know what I mean by that, but rather than try to adjust the colour to make it white, what I recommend doing is adjusting the brightness. So what we actually want is maybe a levels or a curves adjustment that just brightens it. And then we can invert the mask, and then with a white brush in the mask, we can just brush into the water here to brighten it. And by brightening it, we're making it closer to white than it was before. So, realistically, the water probably isn't like a bright white in the scene. It's not going to be the brightest thing in this scene for real. But I think we're allowed a little bit of creative license here with our photography, just to sort of do what we want. And if we want it white, it can be white. Actually, I'm just going to undo that bit that I did. We can keep that distant C, the original darker sort of colour. We could use a luminosity mask here just to tidy things up. But I don't want to spend too long on this video. I just want to sort of get the main points across, really. So, in terms of making the water white, you can do this. You can make it bright, and if it's still got too much blue, then you can look at a curves adjustment and then adjust these individual curves in each color channel. So the way that I recommend doing that is, so let's for example go to the red channel, and then we basically take this control point here and just move it to the left until it touches basically the end of where the data is on the histogram. So in the red channel, that's not very far. The green channel, also not very far. But the blue channel, I think it gives a bit more room. So we can go to here. And now, that has affected the whole image. But if we just look at what it's doing here in the foreground in the water, actually that's still quite blue. So let's see what these other, if we can go a bit further to make it a bit more white. That's a bit more white. We're taking out the red. But you can play with these layers. With these color channels, and just sort of tweak it until the water looks white. Or if I reset this now, we can use these eyedropper tools to basically sample the water and tell Photoshop what we want to be white. There's an extra step after that, but let's show you. So let's click on this white point eyedropper, and let's click on, probably what we want to click on is the brightest part of the water. So let's do that. And now that usually is going to overexpose something, so we can just take the color values from this layer rather than the brightness as well, by changing the blend mode to color. And so here, well, that doesn't look as great. I think I probably preferred it just on the normal blend mode, but it's just a bit too bright, so we can probably just reduce the opacity. And then again, invert the mask on this, and with the black brush, with the white brush, just brush this effect into the water just to reveal it in those bits that we want to make white. So I think that's it's probably probably about as far as I'll take this in this video. Let's see how far we've come. So this is the original. You know, it already starts off with a lot of really nice colours in the sky. That's absolutely beautiful. Sunrise or sunset, I'm not sure which, but yeah, it's really beautiful colours anyway. So the main job here was to increase the brightness in the rocks, and then just add a bit of pop to the image with the sky there, and then just the water adjustments to make the water white. If we wanted to go a little bit further, I mean, we can continue on with various levels adjustments and whatnot, just sort of increasing the contrast to make certain areas stand out a bit more. So, you know, this might be a good adjustment just for the water through the middle. So let me just invert the mask and brush that through, for example. So that's a subtle adjustment that we could make there, just to make that water really pop. And then we could do some dodging and burning, say, in these rocks. I won't do that right now, but that could be the next stage, just to bring out even more detail in the rocks. And yeah, maybe even a autumn effect would work really nicely on here. It might be quite strong, but you know, we can actually, what I'll do is apply this autumn effect just in the highlights. So here's something you can do with the panel. So let me turn off the previews, and I'm just going to click the one on the highlights end of the of this bar. So everything to the right of 0 is a highlight. So I'm going to load a highlight selection, and then immediately click the autumn effect button in the panel. And what that's going to do is create an autumn effect layer, and then create the luminosity mask so that this is only applied to the highlights of the image. So let's have a look at that. So it's adding a real nice subtle glow, and we can probably increase the opacity of this now to 100%. And so that's a nice touch. And compare that to just running the autumn effect without that luminosity selection active. We can see here it's made the shadows way too dark. So, you know, this is just the autumn effect as it is, and this is with it a lot more subtly applied because it's not in the shadows at all. And you know, if we want this to be a bit more strong of an effect, we can then click on the layer mask, click show mask, and then we can use the levels adjustment, and we can make the bright bits brighter whilst leaving the darks dark so that they're not really affected as much. And then yeah, we can see now that's a bit more strong of an effect. And yeah, so like I said a second ago, with a shot like this, you know, this is really you don't really want to take it much further in terms of making these colours stand out, because they're already really beautiful. And I think there's a fine line between you know, colourful images that really pop and being over processed. So you know, this is probably, like I said, as far as I want to take this one. But hopefully you got a lot from the tips on, you know, how to get the most detail out of those, you know, what was severely underexposed shadows in the foreground there. And so that was really the main focus of this video, and then yeah, the rest was just gravy. So all right, yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you next time. Cheers.